Good day, dear students. I'm again with you. Today, we are going to speak about the culture, language, and translation. And during the lecture, you are going to get acquainted about the relevance of translation, culture, and language during the translation process, and how the culture affects the language, how the culture affects the translation process. And here below, we are going to talk about the rules. So if you're ready, we can begin. So the language. There are a lot of definitions on the language, which included here strongly. Language is used to maintain and convey culture and cultural ties. Different ideas stem from different languages using within one structure, and the whole interweaving of these relationships that starts at one's birth. Language is unique. Language is related to one culture, is related to one society, is related to one ethic, and human language especially is related to culture. Culture, according to scientists, is the way of life and its manifestation that are particular to a community that uses a particular language as its means of expression. So culture, that means the style of life, the style of living. Culture belongs to one society. Culture belongs to one ethnic. Culture belongs to one group of people. Here say that the language is a part of culture. When we speak about language is a part of culture, and each language belongs to a special culture that has its own peculiarities, its own features that unlike the other cultures, unlike the other languages. And so, if language is a part of culture, that means while translating, we should give attention to the culture of the society. The term culture originally meant the cultivation of the soul and mind. Culture includes behavior such as courtship or child rearing practices, material things such as tools, clothing, or shelter, institutions, or beliefs. Each nation has got its own culture, and it is related with the soul and mind. When you have got different culture, when the second person has a different culture, the soul and minds are quite different from each other. In this very case, in order to translate, you should understand their soul and mind. Culture is the sum of total of the ways of living built up by group and passed on from one generation to another. Culture is a complex which includes knowledge, belief, art, law, moral, customs, and many other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. And they have one: art, belief, morality, customs that transfers from one generation to another. When we speak about the translation, the communication of the meaning of the source language text is by means of equivalent target language text. So, translation consists of language and culture. While translating, you shouldn't always work with a language, as well as you have to refer to the culture of the nation whose language you are translating to. You shouldn't work only with language. You should just bring the soul, the mind of the second culture. Jerome said that the two things are necessary for the good translator: the adequate understanding of the original language, source language, and an adequate command of language into which one translating receptor language. So, in order to give a good sense of translation, you should have adequate understanding and adequate command of the languages. If you know everything, if you understand everything adequately, you can render the language, you can translate, you can give the meaning of the first language to the second language. Larson claimed that the translation is a complicated process. Translator who is concerned with transferring the meaning will find that the receptor language has a way which desired meaning can be expressed. In order to give the meaning, they should significantly understand the cross-cultural communication. If the translator understands, just clarifies the cross-cultural communication, if he adequately understands the language and has a command of the target and the source languages, he can do it clearly. But how culture transfer through the language? How can the cultures transfer from one language into another? Is it possible? Can translator transfer the culture from one language into another? If yes, how can he do it? How can she do it? How can we transfer the soul and mind the soul and mind of a society into another one if it doesn't exist in the second society. Culture through the language. But how culture transferred through the language? For answering this question, we should consider the relationship between culture and the language which is deeply rooted. Translation is the only way which does it. The fact there is only one human species that is explained by the possibility to transfer senses, meaning from one language to the other, by means of the words, that's by translation. So, only by translation we can just transfer culture from one language into another. But during translation process, there are some barriers that are discussed as follows. There are some obstacles which affect the culture transferring through different languages, such as limitation of sense and censor, culture, religion, and they then are described as follows. Sometimes there are restriction that doesn't exist in one language and exists in the second language, and this is called obstacles concerning to culture, religion, censor, and so on. Here, how can the translator find the way out from difficult situations? How can he give the meaning in the second language that doesn't exist? Limitation and censor. Traditionally, there is something which is lost in translation process. Limitation and censor is obstacles that limit translators in conveying the semantic message in the receptor language. So, when we speak about religion, family, society, rules, I've just told you about it. Some rules exist in one language and they don't exist in the second language. Here, there is called limitation and censor traditionally. What can he do here? Translator. Culture difficulties arising out of the difference of cultures constitute the most serious problems for translators and have produces the most far-reaching misunderstanding among the readers. Culture itself has its own limitations in transferring the source text into target language. Each society or group of people are based on their historical backgrounds, local situations, and religions with their specific language. They build their language and they form their language. According to their background, they form their language, which does not exist in the second part. Look at the screen, you can see the definitions of culture. Culture can be attitudes, culture can be beliefs, culture can be languages, culture can be customs, rituals, behaviors, faith or religion, food, art, drama, attitudes. All of them are different according to the society. All of them are different according to the culture. So one behavior cannot exist in the second one. One ritual doesn't exist in the second just culture. What about customs? Customs are different. One may exist in one culture that doesn't exist in the second culture. Beliefs are different. Arts, drama, music verify according to the society. So how can the translator find the way out from difficult situations? Limitation in translation is one of the specific features of the culture, not necessarily imposed from outside the world. Behaviors which are acceptable will vary from location to location. Nowadays, the major problems in translation is being certainly influenced by different cultural norms in the source language and the target language. Translators' responsibility is to choose the norms that take priority in both languages. What about religion? Religion is one of those obstacles that cause problems in translation. Religion can be understood only by just the cultural language, and to translate this religion context, we face with some limitations that cannot be translated. By religions exist in one language that doesn't exist in the second language will cause the problems for translators. And here, translators should find way out from difficult situations using semantic equivalent in the target language. And when we speak about religion, it's one of these obstacles that cause problems in translation. Religion can be understood only by people who just have the same belief, because religious texts are described in an implicit way. Natural and effective translation is almost impractical. And in order to understand religion, you should know the meaning of the religion. You should know the belief. And if you don't know what kind of features or peculiarities that the religion have, it will be difficult to give the sense in the target language. And that's why you cannot change or destroy the religious text. Making culture universal. Translation plays a great role in order to make the culture universal. While translating, you send the culture from one society to the second one, and so in order to make the culture universal, we have got the global network. During a global network has got different translators, translation systems, translation just tools that gives a sense, one meaning to different kind of languages, and they created culture universal. It is called network. So what about the pop culture? Have you ever thought about pop culture? What is pop culture? And what kind of connection does it have to translation? For some people, it can be a new terminology, and for some people, it may be just known. Let's talk about the pop culture. Now, let's wait for the next slide coming. So the pop culture means, for example, different kind of nations have got different holidays. For example, Mother's Day, Father's Day. Sometimes they become habit to all different countries. Mothers are just very respective people. From one culture to another culture, it becomes pop, and that's why they say pop culture. Sometimes very useful holidays, useful events become just habits to all countries. This kind of culture is called pop culture. To get acquainted with the culture and religious customs is very important for translators. For example, Christmas holiday, or just other things, very important for translators to know about. It's easy for cross-cultural communication. If you know the culture of another society, another people, another nation, it will be very easy for you to make some kind of successful communication. Cultural translation is a practice of translation while respecting and showing the cultural differences. This kind of translation solves some issues linked to culture, such as dialects, food, and agriculture. The main issues that the cultural translation must solve consists of translating the text as showing cultural differences of this text and respecting the source culture. In this way, sometimes the translator should solve the problem by finding out the code of this culture in the target language. The term culture addresses three silent categories of human activity: personal, collective, and expressive. Personal culture just belongs to individuals, collective belongs to social, and expressive means society expression itself. So, and according to it, you can just clarify about the translation in the target language. Is it personal, collective, or expressive? And multiculturalism, which is a present-day phenomenon, plays a role here because it has the impact on almost all